Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The U.S. Supreme Court has punted on a case involving California's Assembly Bill 5. So what does that mean for independent truck drivers and for other lawsuits? Mark Schremer of Landline Magazine helps us answer those questions and others. Truck parking, driver compensation, and the economy. Those were the top three concerns relayed by drivers in the American Transportation Research Institute's 20th Annual Top Industry Issues survey. Rebecca Brewster, president of ATRI, joins the program. The National Academies of Sciences has released a report about how compensation and working conditions affect safety in the trucking industry. I'll cover that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. And finally, California Governor Gavin Newsom's pursuit of a way to address high fuel costs in the state has resulted in a new state law. Scott Thompson gets the details on that and more from our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today is our only story, and it takes us to the U.S. Supreme Court, which has been making a number of decisions lately with regard to trucking issues. We're going to talk about another one next week regarding CBD oil, but today we're going to focus on AB 5, and joining us to sift through the details is Mark Schremer, who's been covering the story for Landline Magazine. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
So the Supreme Court decided this week it's not going to hear a case that claims California's Assembly Bill 5 violates the Equal Protection Clause. There are some possible broader implications here that we're going to talk about in just a moment. But first, let's go over the case itself and just what was being argued.
Yeah, so this case particularly was called Olson versus California, and Lydia Olson represented gig workers in California, and like Uber, Postmates, that sort of thing. And this is all back to AB 5, that Assembly Bill 5, which goes off of the ABC test to determine whether or not, a worker is an employee or an independent contractor. It uses that as a classification test. And basically the issue was that they claimed that violation of the Equal Protection Clause under the U.S. Constitution, that, they were unfairly targeted, like Uber and Postmates, but other app-based services received exemptions from this, this law, and so that was basically the issue. If the idea is that we're supposed to use this test to figure out whether you are unlawfully misclassifying employees as independent contractors, why are you just exempting 50-60% of the companies out there? It's, it either should be misclassification or it shouldn't be, in my opinion. But, that's the case. And unfortunately, the Supreme Court is not going to hear it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't think we have any indication from the Supreme Court as to why they denied to hear this case, right? That would give us some sort of information that might be helpful, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think to put it into context is that on average, I think the Supreme Court receives about 7,000 petitions every year and only decides to hear about 100 to 150 of those. So obviously a really small percentage. So the likelihood is if you petition the Supreme Court, they're not going to hear your case. So that's part of it. But the other unfortunate part of this is the filing on this had just ended. I think it was October 1st. We had the California Employment Law Council had filed an amicus brief, friend of the court brief, on this that they should have been looking at and taking into account. OIDA filed one on October 10th. We had a holiday in between that, and then by October 14th, they're already denying this case. So it seems like they had their mind made up. when they deny this case or deny cases in general, it's just a listing. There's no explanation, so we don't know exactly what aspect of this that they didn't think was compelling enough to go further with it to potentially overturn the Ninth Circuit ruling. It remains to be seen, how all of this is going to play out. Now, the one thing with the gig workers in California is they still have the Prop 22, which was the vote. So a lot of those drivers of that are still going to be protected under that. That doesn't mean that this wasn't a worthy case, in my opinion, to be looked at by the Supreme Court. But at least, I guess, for those workers, they still have some flexibility and rights there under a different protection.
And we've got to be careful, I think, not to read too much into this because AB 5, we've got lawsuits all over the place, or have had lawsuits all over the place, I suppose. This one, as you point out, dealt with gig workers. OIDA still has a separate case that's been filed against AB 5 in the Ninth Circuit. That one is still in progress. We're still waiting on things to happen there. We will see what happens here, but I guess the point is that the legal process will continue to play out here. And we really don't know where it's going to go, obviously. We can kind of maybe try to steal some signs here and there. Yeah. But again, we should be careful not to read too much into this, I think.
Yeah. OIDA's case is separate. They're also having some equal protection arguments in there, but it is a little bit different in that it is more looking at the business-to-business exemptions that have been offered to California interstate drivers. And basically OIDA's argument is it doesn't make sense for a state law to be more focused on the out-of-state employees than the in-state. If you're worried about misclassification, it's just, it seems like they are just kind of picking and choosing as opposed to really applying this law that, in previous court arguments was argued by the state as a law of general applicability. And I don't really see how it's being applied that way when it seems very heavily focused on interstate truck drivers and certain gig workers like Uber and Postmates.
Yeah, disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. You're not an attorney.
Not anymore.
But okay. Well, we're breaking news here. It does strike me that this is a law that perhaps was not crafted in the best possible way, just based on the confusion that it has caused so many different people and entities throughout the state of California. As we look forward here, November 4th, you've got that circle on the calendar. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So, like I said, OIDA has filed their brief in the Ninth Circuit. That is the date now that the state deadline is to reply to that. So we'll be looking for that. Obviously, with courts, there's always extensions you see all the time. But right now, we're looking at November 4th to see what the state has to say in response to OIDA's arguments.
The saga continues, and what happens in California with whatever happens could very well have implications in other states that are keeping a close eye on this. We will keep a close eye on it as well because it is an important case and an important situation out there in California. Mark, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Scott.
That was Mark Schumer of Landline Magazine. We appreciate his time and his input there. We'll now toss it back to you, Mark.
Thanks, Scott. If a carrier, shipper, receiver, or broker tries to coerce you into violating the regulations, document what happened. Then either call 1-888-DOT-SAFT or file a complaint online with the National Consumer Complaint Database. Again, the phone number is 1-888-DOT-SAFT. Next, Rebecca Brewster of ATRI joins the program to talk about truckers and carriers' top priorities. And I'll discuss a report about compensation, working conditions, and safety with OOIDA's Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
At Truck Stop, we've built a better load board for carriers like you. Sign up today and access over 600,000 loads on the most trusted online load board. Learn why the best in the business rely on Truck Stop to make more money and start driving your profit today.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Landline Now, welcome back. For the past 20 years, the American Transportation Research Institute has been taking the pulse of the trucking industry by asking stakeholders about what concerns they have. Each year, the survey yields interesting results, and this year is no different. Joining us to talk it over is ATRI's President and COO, Rebecca Brewster. Rebecca, how you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thanks for having me on today.
Thanks for joining us. And, we've talked about these surveys before in past years, and looks like you had a pretty good turnout for this one, the Top Industry Issues report, the 20th annual one, I should mention as well, right?
Yeah, we did, and it's hard to believe it's been 20 years that we've been doing this, but it is one of my favorite, if not my top, ATRI research initiatives. This is one I still work on myself because I love doing it so much, love seeing how the votes come in and sort of how the issues ebb and flow. But we did have great participation this year. We had over 3,700 industry stakeholders take part in the survey, and of those, just over 31% were professional truck drivers. So we really appreciate that involvement in the survey.
And as a reminder here, this survey is all about finding out what's keeping truck drivers up at night, motor carriers as well. The two things don't always line up, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But could you explain for people out there that may not be familiar with this particular report what exactly it is that you're trying to nail down?
Absolutely. What we're trying to nail down is just what are those pain points? What's happening in the industry that is keeping the professional driver awake or the motor carrier awake or even motor carrier enforcement personnel? I mean, we have everybody across the spectrum in the industry take part in the survey. And from that, we not only get this ranking of the issues, but it's also we ask respondents to the survey to rank strategies. What do you think the industry should be doing about these issues? And so sometimes those strategies are research issues, and so ATRI takes those and runs with them. Sometimes they're advocacy issues at the national level, so the national associations like OIDA take those and run with them. Sometimes they're state level. Things like lawsuit abuse reform typically happens at the state level, and so, for instance, the state trucking associations take those issues and run with them.
Yeah, and it won't surprise people that typically the list, and you break down the list here, top concerns for truck drivers, top concerns for motor carriers, and then you kind of break it down into an overall list for everybody. I want to kind of take those one by one if we could here, starting with truck drivers. And if I'm not mistaken, this we had a new number one top concern this year, right?
Well, there are two issues at the top that flip-flop back and forth depending on the year. But for drivers this year, truck parking, the lack of available truck parking is the number one concern. If Rebecca Brewster had her own personal list, it would be at the top of mine as well.
Yeah, and we've talked to you about that before. How personal or, how passionate you are about the issue there and trying to find solutions to it. The fact that it's been on the list for several years, either one or two for this many years, obviously tells us something about what folks out there are worried about. Was there anything new, I guess, in particular with this year's survey with regard to truck parking that kind of stood out to you? And can you also talk a little bit about some of the strategies that ATRI continues to advocate for to take care of this crisis?
Absolutely. So this is actually the second year in a row that we've seen truck parking as the number two overall issue. So it's not just drivers who are ranking this as a highly concerning issue. It's everybody who takes the survey. And so, for better or worse, I'm going to put that in the win column, that it has kept its high ranking, that everyone recognizes it's a problem. The number one strategy, advocate, we need dedicated federal funding. Right now, the U.S. DOT has made a concerted effort to make aware to state DOTs that they can apply for certain programmatic funds to use that to expand capacity. But the fact of the matter is that puts a state DOT in a position of having to say, do I want to apply for truck parking funds, or do I want to use the funds to maintain my roadway system, expand my roadway system? I mean, those are things the trucking industry wants as well. We want well-maintained roads. And so if we could get that dedicated federal funding program, then states could apply for money from that without having to capitalize or cannibalize their applications for other infrastructure funding.
Yeah. Let's kind of run down the list here as well. Number 2, driver compensation. Again, a top concern, or I guess second top concern for truck drivers there. And the economy was number 3, which also was the number 1 overall concern, right, with the survey. Can you talk a little bit about those two things and what we learned from what people were saying out there?
Right. Well, absolutely. It's hard to disconnect those two issues.
Yeah.
I mean, my compensation is certainly impacted by what's going on in the broader economy. And so that's, the broader economy has had such an impact on freight transportation, and, this continued freight recession we can't seem to shake just yet. And so that's clearly impacting where, drivers' wallets. There's no question. So, as I said, we see truck parking, we see driver compensation. Depending on the year, those two swap 1 and 2 places. One year, Scott, we even had a survey where they tied for the number 1 concern among drivers. But clearly people are worried about the economy. And there are a lot of unknowns about the economy even going forward. What happens in November with the presidential election will have an impact on the economy. What's going to happen in January with the port revisiting of the port labor issues. I mean, there's just a lot of uncertainties. And so people are concerned because at the end of the day, it goes down to how much do I take home in my paycheck.
It strikes me, too, as I look at this list every year, and it makes sense, I suppose, but so many of the things that land in the top 10 list for truck driver concerns are out of their control for the most part, right? We talk truck parking,
right.
We're talking compensation, the economy, certainly a lot of things that we can't control there, speed limiters, fuel prices. These are things that kind of tell me that there are folks out there that are frustrated because they feel helpless with a lot of these issues. And I'm sure that comes through with the responses that you get.
It does. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this annual survey is we allow write-in issues and we allow write-in strategies. And so things like driver compensation first came into the survey because so many drivers were writing it in as one of their top concerns. And you really feel how frustrated drivers are with a number of these issues because they not only select an issue or strategy, they go and write it in as well. And so it really underscores how impactful so many of these externalities over which the driver doesn't have direct control are in their day-to-day lives.
As we kind of shift over to the motor carrier side of these concerns here, the economy, number 1, lawsuit abuse reform, number 2, and the so-called driver shortage, number 3 there on the list. We don't have to necessarily talk about each one individually, but as you look at that list of motor carriers, did anything stand out to you? And I think battery electric vehicles kind of stood out to me at number 8. Kind of a addition there, I think. Is that a newcomer to the list there?
Battery electric vehicles showed up for the first time on the overall top 10 last year in the number 10 spot. But this year it's up on the overall list. It's number 6 overall. And as you said, it's number 8 among motor carriers. And people are concerned. I mean, ATRI's research has documented all the challenges associated with this push to electrify the nation's vehicle fleet. Everything from the cost of a battery electric Class 8 truck is just prohibitive. I mean, really, truly, to the lack of charging infrastructure nationally where we're supposed to recharge our vehicles. And then even the sufficiency of the nation's grid. I mean, in one of our studies, we found that if tomorrow every vehicle in the U.S., car and truck, was battery electric, it would take over 40% of our current electricity generate to power those vehicles. So it's just not an achievable thing, and yet these mandates are just and their timelines are just pushing forward, despite what rational thought and what the research shows us.
Yeah. If we zoom out again one more time and look at the overall list, or it could be the motor carrier list or the truck driver list, You mentioned earlier, so you're passionate about this list and you enjoy taking part in it because it does kind of give you a full picture of where things stand out there and what people are worried about. Did anything surprise you? I mean, what kind of stood out to you, I guess, this year maybe as opposed to past years, as you put this study together?
Well, I think the one that surprises me every year when it shows up in the top 10 is CSA. We're 14 years after we first got CSA out of FMCSA, and yet we still have, as an industry, we still have concerns with CSA. We're concerned about how it evaluates or scores our safety performance. We're concerned about the speed at which data queue requests are reviewed by the agency to more positively impact our scores, crash preventability. I mean, there are a whole host of issues with CSA that just keep it in this top 10 list year after year.
One of the things, and we talked about this a bit, but one of the things that's unique about this particular report is that you do offer strategies. It's not just people complaining and you putting a list together,
Right, right.
We're not going to get to all the issues and all the strategies that you kind of lay out in the report, and I encourage people out there to go check it out for themselves. But I'm going to ask you if there is a particular issue there and a particular strategy that you feel like you think people should maybe focus on over the next year that maybe we could make some real progress on. What stands out to you in that respect? Because these are big problems we're talking about here, and it's going to take, a lot of people coming together to come up with solutions here. But is there one particular issue and one particular strategy that you feel like, hey, we're close on this. We can get there if we just all kind of pull together?
Well, I'm going to go back to my soapbox issue, truck parking. And
Sure.
Honestly, I think because we as an industry have harped on this, and I'm going to take a little piece of credit for that, for this annual survey, that it has captured the attention of Congress. We know we've got the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. It's bipartisan introduced. If we could just get that over the finish line and get that dedicated source of funding for truck parking, and who's going to not want to vote for that? I mean, seriously, who's going to say, no, I don't give my support to providing safe places for America's drivers to rest at night? I mean, it's so common sense, and there's nothing political about it, and we just need to get that over the finish line.
Absolutely. Another thing, too, speed limiters. The conversation's kind of died down, I think, a little bit in the past several months as FMCSA's kind of kicked the can down the road on that issue, but clearly still a big concern for especially company drivers and owner-operators out there. I think it made the list pretty high on the list for both of them, right?
It did. So for drivers overall, it ranked number 5, but then when we drilled down into how do company drivers rank the issues versus owner-operators rank the issues, both have it at number 4. So, I mean, it is a big issue.
Yeah. And, I mean, people that respond to you, too, they seem pretty clear-eyed about, what's going on out there. And they're giving you, responses and their own personal experiences. And I imagine a lot of those hit home pretty strongly as well. Did you learn anything from this year's survey that you maybe hadn't thought about in great detail?
It's always interesting. I go back after we publish the report and I go through in more detail those write-in responses.
Yeah.
Again, as I said, sometimes they're just underscoring how someone voted, but they do raise some new issues. And, there is concern, continued concern about driver training standards, for instance. Are we adequately training new entrants to this industry to be able to operate a large commercial vehicle? And so there's oftentimes a lot of writing commentary on that topic as well.
Yeah, I think that this report is one of the better ones, I think, that come out every year to kind of paint a picture of where things stand and the problems out there. And again, the strategies that we can all kind of look at together and hopefully come to some solutions on these things. And you're passionate about it, and understandably so. And Rebecca, we appreciate your time talking with us, and we'll talk to you again soon, especially maybe next year around this time, or maybe before then when something else comes out. We do appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on today.
Our thanks to Rebecca Brewster of ATRI. You can check out the Top Industry Issues survey for yourself, along with a host of other research on their website, truckingresearch.org. We'll step out for a quick break, but hang tight. Landline Now returns right after this.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Capital Reman, the leader in remanufactured diesel engines and components, has partnered with OOIDA to offer exclusive member benefits. Visit CapitalReman.com today to support America's transportation industry and take advantage of your benefits.
When it's time to overhaul your truck engine, help protect it by insisting on a genuine Vibertech TVD crankshaft damper. Heavy duty, absolute premium quality, and they're made right here in the USA. Find a dealer at VibertechTVD.com.
The National Academies of Science has released a report about how compensation and working conditions affect safety in the trucking industry. And while the findings may be surprising to some, many in trucking will likely see some familiar themes. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined as always by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, how are you doing?
Doing all right, Mark. Good to be with you.
Well, good to have you here. It's kind of interesting, and this may be kind of a nuance. This is not actually an in-depth study of the topic that I mentioned at the top here. What is this report essentially?
Yeah, so, our hope was that this would really be an examination looking at if the effects of driver compensation, the method, the amount of compensation had an impact on driver safety. And this committee that was formed after the enactment of the 2021 highway bill, this was a report mandated by Congress. They began working November of 2022, had quite a few meetings, some public, some private, did a lot of research. They've essentially came back here and, said that, more study is going to be needed and kind of more specific study. They weighed in a lot about, some of the challenges between long distance truckload, long haul truckload and private carriers, and some of the challenges and, some of the obstacles in proprietary information from carriers about how much they pay that really led to, I think some inconclusive stuff kind of generally. But I think there was also some points that are going to be critical moving forward. Certainly their take and analysis of any notion of a driver shortage and the fact that simply does not exist, I think is going to be helpful for our argument among lawmakers. They sort of blasted the ATA's studies on that and kind of kind of what we've highlighted for decades now, that it's not a driver shortage problem. It's a driver retention problem, and large carriers are using kind of this driver shortage. I think they mentioned a chronic perception of a driver shortage, really just to keep prices down in a race to the bottom and really rely on high turnover.
Why did the National Academy of Sciences take up this topic? I mean, was this something that they were told by Congress to do?
Yeah. So, Congress back in 2021, and part of the big highway bill, as part of this look at younger drivers, they put a provision in the highway bill outlining a under 21 pilot program that is in effect right now for FMCSA. But as part of that pilot program, kind of in addition, they wanted to look, based on a lot of concerns that we have told to Congress about the safety of younger drivers, using younger drivers not to help any false narrative of a driver shortage, but to keep compensation levels below market value. We were able to, force Congress to put in a study to look at driver compensation and its effects on safety, looking at the methods of driver pay, whether piece rate pay, which we think doesn't help safety at all, certainly doesn't help retention for the most part. Really wanted them to kind of take a closer look and see if there was any correlations, causations, connections that could be made to driver compensation and safety. Based on a lot of our findings internally within OOIDA, and I think kind of common sense as well, the better you pay drivers, the better you treat them, the more likely they are going to stay in the industry. And certainly we've seen the more experience you have in the industry, the more safe you're going to be on the road. So we were hoping this study could further this notion that the whole piece rate system within the industry kind of needs to be overturned. When you look at truckload carriers and some of these smaller carriers that have fixed routes, more reliable routes, able to have more time at home, able to have more competitive wages, those drivers tend to have higher retention levels, stay in the industry longer, and operate more safely. We were hoping this report could kind of emphasize that fact a little better, but they kind of took a pass for the most part, but have directed FMCSA to take up some further study.
Let's talk a little bit about that here. I mean, it took them 158 pages to basically say, let's look into this more. But this is not an unknown topic or a topic that has not been discussed in the industry. Is there research out there already on this topic or that touches on this topic in some way?
Certainly, there's been quite a few reports looking at the way drivers are being paid, and I know that this committee, heard a lot of presentations, did a lot of research. One particular, academic, Professor Michael Belzer from Wayne State, has done decades of research, really emphasizing the need to not pay drivers just by the time they spend on the road. That doesn't contribute to driver retention or highway safety. The committee itself got to hear from the OOIDA Foundation early on back in January of 2023. The committee, the Driver Compensation Study Committee, met with the OOIDA Board of Directors in the spring of 2023. We also did some more private meetings with some of our drivers as well, and those are all referenced throughout the report. Unfortunately, in some of these academic studies, it can be tough to really create the amount of certainty and data needed for some of these folks to really sign off on anything unequivocally. And they kind of note the problems that they had in gathering data from larger carriers and proprietary compensation statistics. They also noted, that piece rate is so common among the industry. It's really kind of hard to isolate that and compare it to another way of compensation. So that was, some of the challenges that they had. They did make 2 recommendations to FMCSA about current future research opportunities that could be executed to perhaps gain some more specifics in terms of driver compensation and safety. And they're pretty technical. But as you mentioned, 158-page report. I think we had a little more hopes that this would, really give Congress, DOT, Department of Labor, who was also involved in this process, on some high-level recommendations and policies that could be carried out. Unfortunately, we did not get those. But I think there are going to be aspects of this that lawmakers are going to look at, kind of have their eyes opened and maybe can take some steps to address kind of the longstanding inadequate driver compensation, really look at some policies that we've continued to mention, whether that's detention time, overturning the Fair Labor Standards Act motor carrier exemption, really trying to cut back on the use of piece rate pay there too. So this is going to be helpful, not as helpful, I think, as we thought back in 2021 when we really got this provision into law, but Of course, we're going to have another highway bill coming up here next Congress, so I think another opportunity for us.
Most of what we talked about so far deals with compensation and its effect on safety, and that seemed to be the bulk of the talk in the study. But they were also supposed to be looking at working conditions and the effect of that on safety. Is there anything significant in there relating to working conditions?
Yeah, just noting the unpredictability for long-haul drivers and the working conditions that are associated with the long-haul sector within the industry. Irregular schedules, varied routings, extended time away from home, they note, are largely uniform across the TL sector. So it, again, they mentioned severely limits the ability to compare the effects of alternative compensation methods and working conditions. But I think when you look at some of the companies that are doing it the right way, paying their drivers, making sure they have enough home time, those drivers clearly are staying with those companies, staying with those carriers, and again building up that experience. So I think moving forward, we need to kind of identify the carriers and certainly want to hear from the drivers who are satisfied with their compensation and perhaps adopt some of those principles across the board.
Let's go on to another topic here, Jay. The U.S. Department of Transportation is proposing changes to its workplace drug and alcohol testing regulations. Let's kind of start with what specific changes are being made here.
Yeah, so this is in regards to allowing the use of electronic signatures, forms, and record keeping by agencies who are administering the DOT-regulated testing programs. And currently, entities conducting drug and alcohol testing are required to use, sign, and store paper documents exclusively. The proposed rule would allow but not necessarily require the use of electronic signatures, forms, and storage of that data, would apply to all employers and contractors responsible for administering DOT drug and alcohol testing programs. So really trying to modernize the administration of the DOT drug and alcohol testing process. This is a concept that we've supported in terms of really providing time and cost savings for drivers to hopefully process the paperwork, process these forms in a more efficient manner. The one thing that's critical is when you talk about moving stuff electronically, you also have to provide those information technology, the cybersecurity, the personal privacy safeguards to do that in a safe manner as well. But I think overall, this is a step in the right direction. This is a notice of proposed rulemaking. There's going to be a 60-day comment period that will go through the middle of December. And hopefully this can be, finalized hopefully as early next year. 'Cause, we think there's really an opportunity that this is going to make things for drivers going through these drug and alcohol testing programs and processes to take away some of the red tape here.
It's interesting because the agency said it expected, among other things, that this would reduce costs to the industry. And it doesn't seem like, from the trucker's point of view at least, that there's much cost involved in just signing a piece of paper. Is this really a major financial burden on trucking operations?
It's not a huge one, but signing the paperwork, sending it back in to wherever you've got to mail it back in occasionally. If the paperwork gets lost, kind of going through that process again. So I think, primarily the cost savings are going to be from the agency side in terms of the paperwork processing, but I think there are going to be some benefits for drivers and motor carriers as well.
Okay. Well, Jay, we're out of time. There's a lot more to talk about here, but thank you very much for the information.
Okay. Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be right back. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
If you're running ultra-low sulfur diesel in your vehicle, make sure you are prepared and protected all winter long with Howes Diesel Treat, the #1 anti-gel product in North America from the 100-plus year trusted brand Howes Products.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Owner-operators need roadside speed. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
We've hit the home stretch of the show today, and we've got just enough time to take a run through a couple states making moves on the cost of fuel. Joining us with all the details and all the analysis is Keith Coble, Landline Magazine State Legislative Editor. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, just a couple of guys, us talking about fuel.
That's right. For the next 9 minutes or so, that is what we are going to do. And we're going to start in California, a state obviously notorious for its high fuel prices. But in a bid to lower them a bit, I guess, we've got a new law in the state that puts the focus on oil refineries. What is the plan here, Keith?
Yeah, it is a little bit of a challenge to talk about California fuel and be lighthearted about it. Something that from all sides, all aspects of the fuel costs in California, you've got folks that have different ideas about how to address it. In California, as far as the legislature goes, and the governor here for the past couple years made multiple attempts to get stuff approved to address concerns about fuel prices there in the state. The most recent endeavor, which has been signed into law this week, during a special session dealing specifically with fuel costs, putting in place a new requirement on oil refineries there in the state, something that the governor has described as addressing fuel price spikes. The focus has been on, with this legislation and now being signed into law, putting in minimum fuel storage requirements and standards for refiners in case there's an outage or if they have maintenance maybe that's necessary that potentially wasn't planned. But all of this would be put under the direction of the California Energy Commission, which, those who are critical of the fact that it is an unelected commission, something that folks really don't have a say on, whatever decisions that they might make or policies that they put in place. But yeah, this new rule again, putting in requirements and standards for refiners that do not adhere to these new rules that will be put in place by the California Energy Commission, they could face fines or penalties as much as $1 million a day if they are not following the rules. So anyway, yeah, definitely something that they're excited about there, the leadership at the State House and the governor, that they believe will help hold down or prevent spikes in fuel prices.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see, and I'm not sure that they have mentioned what kind of effect this is going to have on fuel prices there in the state. Obviously, California among the highest there, if not the highest, I should say, in the country. I know, and we've talked about this before, there was some pushback from not just people within California about this plan, but people outside of California as well. I assume they are not very happy with this being signed into law. But their concerns are being expressed. What are they saying basically about this plan?
Yeah, I mean, it's potentially significant whenever you have governors of neighboring states asking California in this case, hold on, can you please give more thought to what you're doing? The governors of Arizona and Nevada, I mean, they, and we talked about it here recently as they were getting ready for the special session, their concern was that, getting fuel from California, what it could do driving up the cost is essentially what they're concerned about, driving up the cost for fuel for those who are fueling in Arizona and Nevada. There was an official with Chevron who submitted a letter to California lawmakers here in recent days saying the same thing. So definitely there is that concern now that it will be a matter of time to see if it comes to fruition. But yeah, it's definitely some of the criticisms about pursuing this avenue. You've got Republicans at the State House there in California who voted in opposition to this. They had asked for other methods to be pursued to address high fuel prices, which were not heard in any committees. That it was just essentially what they decided to spend time on there in the legislature was the governor's bill, not other potential remedies to address high fuel prices, which you're going to hear about whenever that does happen from those who don't feel like their possible solutions were addressed.
Let's move up the Pacific Coast here a bit to Washington State. Voters there on Election Day in a few weeks here will be asked whether they want to repeal the state's cap and trade program. Before we get into the ballot measure, let's run through this program, which is quite controversial, Keith.
Yeah, something that was, I believe it was passed like 3 some odd years ago, enacted in January 2023. It's our Climate Commitment Act, and requires industries that exceed, they go above a certain threshold of greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. Essentially they have to pay for the amount that they exceed that threshold. The idea being there in the state, the goal is they're wanting to reduce their emissions to 95% below what the levels were back in 1990. They want to accomplish this by 2050. With that rule in place here for almost 2 years, the feeling is that it's resulting in higher fuel prices. So not long after they implemented this Climate Commitment Act there in Washington State, you had a ballot pursuit to get a question on the November 2024 ballot, which has, a month away. But to get a question on the ballot that would end that program, would cancel it effectively. So at this point, waiting to see if voters there in Washington State believe that it's worth doing an overhaul or getting rid of it.
Yeah, and I think some of the arguments for and against this are maybe kind of obvious, but obviously both sides are making a push here leading up to Election Day. Can you kind of run through, I guess, both sides of this issue, supporters, opponents? What are they saying about the ballot initiative and why people should agree with them, I suppose?
Yeah, well, for those who are advocating for getting this question passed to nix the program that they've implemented there, they say that again, higher fuel prices are resulting. You have when you go shopping, grocery costs are higher. You have other goods in the supply chain that are up, all again resulting from industries that are trying to recoup their costs that are related to the program. Those who are in favor of or behind the Climate Commitment Act that they have there, they say that if they get rid of the program, essentially, it's going to result in more health issues long term. You have negative effects to traffic as well that will result because again, I mean there is some money coming into the state from those who are going over what the cap is. So yeah, there's definitely the financial factor in all of this for both the state, but also for those who are trying to get rid of this program, talking about the financial factor that is in effect or hardship for consumers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this one pans out, considering how big a talking point inflation has been and the cost of things has been in recent months. But we'll find out, I guess, November 6th, the day after Election Day, what the people of Washington State decide. Keith, you'll keep us updated on all these stories and more at landline.media. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
That was Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine, and this has been Landline Now. We're out of time today, but back tomorrow with another show. We hope to see you then. Until then, take care.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome, and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.